to commend this bill to the House.
I call Simeon Brown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity to take a call on the Misuse of Drugs Medicinal Cannabis Amendment Bill, one of the most regressive bills that this Parliament has ever done. And firstly, Madam Speaker, I'd like to take a moment to talk about what this bill actually does. This bill is decriminalisation of cannabis by stealth. And one only needs to look up into the chamber to see the former leader of the Aotearoa Legalised Cannabis Party, Michael Appleby, to actually realise that that is the purpose of this bill. It is about legalising cannabis by stealth. This bill is not about trying to set up a regulation regime for medicinal cannabis. This is about legalising cannabis by stealth, rather than leaving that decision to the people of New Zealand who should be the ones who make the decision around whether we should be legalising cannabis or not. And, Madam Speaker, I'd like to point out that this bill includes no regulation whatsoever. This bill doesn't talk about who can apply for a licence. It doesn't talk about who can be granted a licence. It doesn't talk about the eligibility of people who can apply for a licence, the suitability of individuals or corporate bodies who should be able to apply for licence. It doesn't talk about safety of locations for licences. It doesn't talk about restrictions of areas about where you can have licences, where you can produce medical cannabis. It doesn't talk about the issuing or the duration of licences. It doesn't talk about the suitable people who should be involved, the storage, the undertaking activities in specified locations. It doesn't talk about anything. This bill does not have any regulation, but hands that over to another working group, which this government likes. This 201st working group that this government has appointed is on medicinal cannabis and does nothing but legalises cannabis by stealth. Secondly, Madam Speaker, this bill is not about medicine. Smoking is not a medicine. As a country, we are pursuing smoke-free 2025. But this bill legalises cannabis to be smoked outside the school gates, outside the social centres, outside the places where people who are seeking help from addiction services, people are able to smoke cannabis outside those places. I think of all the places up and down our country who are providing amazing services, addiction support, and trying to help those to get off drugs. And this bill does not stop people from smoking cannabis outside those premises. I think that's a real shame and something this government has failed to even take into account when looking into this issue. And this bill is not about medicine. Medicine is tested. Medicine goes through a pharmaceutical process. Medicine is prescribed by doctors. It is approved by MedSafe. This bill does not include any of those elements. This bill is empty of all of those elements. This bill is not about medicine. This bill, again, Madam Speaker, is about legalising cannabis and decriminalising cannabis by stealth, which is, as Chloe Swarbrick and other members have said, is the ultimate aim in what they are trying to do. But let's be honest, let's have that honest conversation as a country. Let's not try and put that under the guise of something with the use of the word medicine. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, this bill does not acknowledge the harm of cannabis that is caused in our community. Last year, 432 individuals were hospitalised in New Zealand for behavioural and mental disorders from smoking cannabis. 432 people were hospitalised for behavioural and mental disorders from the use of cannabis just last year. 79 people were hospitalised from poisoning from using cannabis just last year. This bill does not take into account the real harm being caused in our communities, the harm which our hospital system has to deal with and grapple with. It does not look into what the harm that is caused to children by cannabis and by poisoning from cannabis, and instead it decides to essentially open up the floodgates without a proper conversation, give the power to a working group so that they can set up some regulations over the next year, but essentially decriminalises the use of cannabis for personal possession and personal use without there being a proper conversation, using the guise of medicine when it is not. Madam Speaker, I stand opposed to this piece of legislation. Thank you.
I call Dr Liz Craig. This is a split call. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today is a really big milestone, not only for the